Greetings and welcome back to my channel, World War II Books Where to Start. I am Colonel Klink, reporting from Stalag 13. Let's talk about the camps today. We got two heavy hitters here, neither of which has any happy material in it at all. But if you want the serious stuff, here we go. The concentration camps and death camps and POW camps are all kind of mixed up in people's minds as to what was what and who was who and what the function of them was. Of course, Auschwitz is the big star, and it's kind of an outlier as well as a main party because of its dual nature of both slave labor camp and extermination camp. So there's plenty of material about the camps, but if you watch documentaries, it's almost always about Auschwitz, and it's kind of tough to keep things straight in people's minds to explain. It was not a one-sided, one-dimensional thing. It was a very complex issue, and then we have the fact that there were so many camps. There were, at the end of the war, about 27 main camps and over 500 or more sub-camps, maybe as many as 1,000, because the labor situation got so fractured, and there were just people being shipped everywhere to try to make stuff when it didn't matter anymore. But having said that, we'll dive right into the first one here. Ravensbruck by Sarah Helm. Plenty of glare on that baby. That's about the best I can do with it. Alright. This was published in 2014 to the tune of 658 pages, main body text, and we got 85 pages of notes, bibliography, and index, along with a fairly good photo section, mostly snapshots of individuals, both guards and prisoners. So Ravensbruck is the thing about it that makes it unique was it was a dedicated camp for women. They put all their bad eggs, as it were, females, into one place. This was established pre-war. It's just northwest of Berlin, maybe 50-60 miles, and pretty close to Sachsenhausen camp. And the initial purpose of the SS camps in pre-war Nazi Germany was simply punishment and re-education. Some people were actually released after their sentences were finished. Now, this was extrajudicial stuff. This was not in the court system. Largely independent from the court system. Sometimes the courts could force Himmler to release individuals, most of the time not. And as the Justice Ministry diminished in importance and Hitler kind of crushed it in the run-up to war, it really didn't matter at all. So there's the individual justice system with regular criminals went to regular state prisons. And there were the SS camps where Himmler would go out and do send the Gestapo and out to do mass arrests of unwanted social elements. Around prostitutes, asocials, communists, Jews, whoever he wanted to get his hands on at a particular time. Very ad hoc, very haphazard. Because he was building his empire and he didn't know exactly how he wanted to build it or where it was going to go. And without the war, it may have fizzled away and just lost its importance. He eventually tried to turn into an economic monster, which kind of failed too. The Ravensbruck, they wanted all their women together to solve the issue of how you guard women and men in camps and keep them from fraternizing with each other in the pregnancies and all the issues that come along with that. So they also feature female guards at Ravensbruck to try to take care of some of that corruption potential for the SS with male guards. So the military stuff around the camp, the machine guns, the guard posts were manned by male SS, but the guards inside the camp were primarily female. The camp commandant was still a male, of course, because these SS women guards were auxiliaries. They weren't officially SS because that went against the Nazi creed of men in the field and women at home kind of routine. So having got over that hurdle, Sarah Helm takes this very slowly, step by step, and ignores about nothing up to 44. It's very thorough. It's very thorough. She introduces you to nationalities as they're introduced into the camp. So there's a bit of back and forth timeline-wise, but I think it's a good way to break stuff up because oftentimes they were housed together in prison blocks together, different nationalities. Sometimes they were grouped by the triangles they wore. And sometimes those overlap. The system kind of interchanged and revolved and evolved through time as the Nazis changed their priorities and whatnot. So you get introduced to the communists and the asocials and the prostitutes, and then the Poles, the Jews, the French, the Russians, etc., etc., etc. She'll go through all those nationalities and subgroups and tell you their individual stories, and it's really detailed, gritty, nasty, grisly stuff, as you might expect it to be. But here again, this is a punishment camp / re-education camp, not a purpose-built death camp. It's not a factory line extermination process. People died, of course, through brutality, direct brutality of the guards, through the punishment block, where you often left to starve to death, through medical experimentation, through lethal injections when the doctors felt like it, to thin the herd, as it were, because they got too many people at the camp and everyone's sick and they can't work. So why not just finish them off? And then, of course, disease. There's always disease in these camps: typhoid, typhus, and tuberculosis. And the Germans were especially terrified of typhus, to the point where she mentions I think it was in 1941, the prisoners kind of faked a typhus outbreak and scared the hell out of the staff, to the point where they actually left the camp and left the keys with the head capo and said, "We'll be back when this thing settles down." Now the SS were still outside with the machine guns at the main gates and whatnot, so you couldn't just like, "Oh, hey, we're free, let's run away." But this is kind of bizarre that they actually said, "Abandon ship, we'll see you later, and if you're still alive when we get back, congratulations." Okay, it's weird. I don't think that happened in any other camp. But the way they did punishment and re-education was to try to work you to tears and wear you out and break your will. So there's a lot of slinging bricks and shoveling sand, and they took away your shoes in the summertime. They had you wear white clogs in the winter. That was the only concession. You had one thin piece of clothing. Didn't like anything else. Maybe a blanket if you're lucky. Some of the block guards were really, really vindictive and made the windows stand open all night long. And these things have no stoves in them anyway, so you're just exposed to the elements. And if you get sick and die, well, there's one less mouth to feed. And of course, fortunes of these prisoners wobble up and down with the willpower of the regime to either make it more awful or try to make it a little bit less awful. But once the war starts, of course, all bets are off, and it's going to slide downhill into pure chaos eventually. Chaos being reached in 1944, where Sarah Helm kind of loses control of the story, and it's no discredit to her. The Reich basically imploded in 44 with all the military setbacks, the food situation, the armament situation, and the political control slipping as the regime starts to fragment at the edges and not sure how to bring this thing to a close. They're dedicated to death and destruction, but now it's coming back on them, and they don't know how to counteract it. And their general reaction is simply to proceed at a more frenzied pace of killing. And that's where Ravensbruck does turn into kind of a dual-purpose camp, and that Sarah Helm chronicles there were some there was a gas chamber built there and a crematorium, and you can start getting a bigger influx of prisoners that are being rounded up as forced labor, sent to Ravensbruck, or just political and social undesirables, and a lot of them end up at Ravensbruck, and the situation gets dire. There's no extra resources allocated. It just gets worse and worse. So the gas chambers, you have selections, and people get marched off, and sometimes they're shot and then cremated. Sometimes they're strict right into the gas chambers and cremated. So it gets really awful. She also goes through the medical experiments very thoroughly. Most histories of the camps, general histories, or even history like Auschwitz by Lawrence Reeves, will mention the medical experiments, but not delve into them deeply. Sarah Helm does the opposite. She wants you to know all about it, and she goes through it step by step. In this case, the famous one was the gas gangrene experiments performed on Polish women, where SS doctors would make incisions into their legs and in place in their bodies debris, broken glass, twigs, sticks, stones, rocks, dirt, and then sew them back up so they would get infected and would develop gangrene. And they would try to counteract it later with these experimental drugs they were trying, because they did not have penicillin. Results were negligible, and in many cases these Polish women died screaming in agony. Some survived, and it went on for several months. So those are the most famous experiments, but she also covers the human warming experiments, which you will run into if you read anything about Nazi doctors. You'll know about the infamous Himmler-inspired human warming experience, because the women for that trial came from Ravensbruck. So she covers that too. And man, this is a tour de force. It's told very evenly across the board. There's no hysterics. There's really no condemnation of the Germans. She maintains a professional historian's neutral tone throughout. She doesn't lambaste the Germans for being the sadists and psychopaths and sick individuals they turned out to be. Not even the experimental doctors. Amazing she can hold back like that. There's a good epilogue to it to kind of bring you up to date with what's going on today and how Ravensbrück is not known in the general public, of course. And unless you're a devotee of World War II or that period of the 20th century history, you probably wouldn't know it. However, I remember reading about it in high school. I knew about it. But I'm into that, So yeah, in general public, people probably don't know the name. And she kind of lambasts that as kind of a gross oversight on the historians and researchers, and it deserves a wider audience. Yeah, it sure does. But given the totality of the criminality of the Third Reich, Ravensbrück is just yet one more horror story. So she's the pioneer here. Kudos to her, but I don't think she needs to wave the flag of it's a crying shame this hasn't been exposed before. It was exposed in Nuremberg trials. It was just one of the series of horrors that they had to deal with there. So yeah, in the general public's eye, it did fade out over time. So a nice epilogue overall, but she does lambaste Siemens Corporation for their use of forced labor within the camp, somehow expecting that they're going to give her a big mea culpa and personally apologize to her on behalf of the victims. I think that's unrealistic on our part. And naive for thinking that a corporation is going to pony up to you, a lone British researcher. No, probably not. They're looking at their legal culpability, because that's always a thing in Germany, right? Siemens still exists, it still pumps out product. They're beholden to their shareholders. They're there to make a profit. They want to keep this evil past as dim a light bulb as they can, and acknowledge it only if they're absolutely pressed to. So if you're looking for a big ad campaign on TV to apologize for this stuff, nah, you're out of luck there. Ain't gonna happen. Doesn't take away from it. I still give it 5 stars. I just wish she had been a little bit more even-handed there. But I don't think you can go wrong with this. It's detailed and gritty and nasty. Don't go in expecting any love stories. It's bad stuff. Alright, and then on to KF by Nicholas Waxman. This is from 2015. 626 pages. 239 pages of notes, etc. And here's your general history of the entire camp system. Again, not the state-run prisons, and not the prisoner of war camps for uniformed military personnel of enemy nations. Just the KL, Konzentrationslager, SS run. And he's going to go from the little tiny wildcat camps, as they were kind of called, directly upon the takeover of Hitler in 1933, up to the more formal system, starting with Dachau, also in 1933. Dachau was the only one that ran from the start to end of the war, start of the regime to the end of the war. So again, we get the entire run-up and how it started at a very small scale, and re-education and punishment of certain groups. And again, Jews were not featured at the beginning. It was mostly communists. The Nazis were trying to get their political control together and make sure there were no counter-revolutions against them. Their biggest enemy was the communists, and there were a lot of communist sympathizers. There's a big political party, a big force in Germany. So they took control of the communists first and took care of them. And they shot them or put them in the camps, lock and key, see you later. Once they're on solid ground with that, then they go on to expand the racial theory, getting the degenerates, the asocials, and the habitual criminals off the streets. Those that the justice system didn't snare. Again, mass arrests of whoever we don't like, and we get more radical as we go, working towards the Fuhrer. So, Waxman is not as good a writer as Sarah Helm. It's a bit of not a sludge, but some plotting here. And again, he's got to go back and forth timeline-wise for different topics. This is kind of a survey course as well as introduction to all the main camps. The surveys of different topics and going back and forth, and often illustrated with one or two horror stories of individuals within a particular camp at a particular time for a particular reason. So the two feature camps here are Dachau and Auschwitz. He does park his bus for quite a while at Auschwitz, and it kind of has to for the sweeping history here because of Auschwitz's dual function and the sheer volume of people that ended up there in one way or another, one nationality or another, for whatever reason, especially late in the war when it gets really chaotic. And as I said before, the SS are just killing as many Jews as they can, as many people as they can, as quickly as they can, as they lose control of the military situation. The ideological mission has to be carried out above all, even above the needs for forced labor. Himmler and company were willing to kill most of the transports to Auschwitz, the highest, and keep only 25% roughly of any one transport for forced labor, even though the need for forced labor within the German armament section was just limitless and devouring, because these slaves were worked to death or worked up to the point of death and returned to original camp when they were completely useless. The need for fresh bodies never ended. But Himmler was still unwilling to concede that more than what he deemed was necessary a percentage should live. Everybody had to die if he said they had to die. So you get this ramping up of insanity throughout the war. And again, Nicholas Waksman, just like Sarah Hallam, kind of loses control of the story in 1944. It just can't be helped. There's the proliferation of camps and subcamps at the time, along with the deteriorating military situation, kind of invites that kind of chaos in the storytelling. So whereas it's a nicely controlled, tight story up until 44, in both books, it kind of goes kaflooey a little bit. And you kind of lose the main thread as there's so much to deal with. The real nasty, the nastiest of the nasty stories come in at 45. There's some really grisly things in there that are just, if you've ever seen the raw film footage of the liberation of Bergen-Belsen and bulldozing bodies in the mass graves right after liberation, it's that kind of stuff on paper. Really, just really brutally nasty. So if you're not up to the task of it, don't do it. It's going to get you. Overall, 4 stars because of the back and forth nature, and he's just not as smooth a storyteller as Sarah Hallam. So 4 stars. And that'll finish us up for today. Just two heavy hitters, KL and Ravensbruck. I hope you find one of those that is enjoyable and readable. And until next time, happy reading.